Hello, and welcome to the demo session for Specific License Reservation for Collaboration Smart Licensing. Specific License Reservation, or SLR, is an important option for customers with highly secure deployments that include restrictions against connectivity from inside their data centers to the Internet and Internet-based services like Cisco Smart Software Manager. I'm Matt Jordy, and I'm a Technical Marketing Engineer on the Collaboration Technology Group, or CTG, Technical Marketing Engineering Team. All right, in this demo session, I'll start with a quick overview of Cisco Smart Software Licensing, explaining how it works and where Specific License Reservation, or SLR, fits within this licensing framework. Next, I'll walk you through a specific license reservation operation, starting with an unlicensed system and finishing with a fully licensed system capable of supporting encrypted calling. Then at the end, I'll share a few caveats to be aware of when it comes to specific license reservation and a few references you can consult for more information. All right, let's get started with a short overview of Cisco Smart Software Licensing for collaboration. First, Cisco Smart Software Licensing enables dynamic licensing of applications and platforms, including collaboration products like Unified Communications Manager and Unity Connection. Cisco Smart Licensing is implemented with a licensing service running on an application or platform which communicates with the Cisco Smart Software Manager, or Cisco SSM service, available online at software.cisco.com. The way this works is that the application or platform provides inventory information for those items requiring licensing. So, for example, in the case of Unified Communications Manager, that would be users and endpoint devices. In return, the Cisco Smart Software Manager service provides license registration and authorization information, which, if appropriate, ensures the application or platform is properly licensed with the necessary capacity and functionality. This is what smart licensing entails. It's worth pointing out that one of the many benefits of smart licensing, particularly for collaboration applications, is that the licenses purchased by the organization are shared in a pool with the organization's smart account, enabling the organization to dynamically use and share the licenses in the pool. So, for example, if you had two unified communications manager clusters and decided to move, say, 1,000 users and devices from one cluster to the other, you wouldn't have to worry about the licensing impact of this user device migration. The reason being that with smart licensing, the unified communications manager licenses initially in use by the original cluster are returned to the organization's licensing pool, which the new cluster can now consume for the new users' devices that were added. Finally, it's worth noting that smart licensing was introduced into the collaboration product set, including Unified Communications Manager and Unity Connection, back with Collaboration System Release, or CSR 12.0. It's also important to be aware that with the introduction of smart licensing, it became a requirement that systems like Unified Communications Manager and Unity Connection could not be enabled for encrypted calling, that is, with SIP TLS signaling and SRTP, or secure RTP media, without being properly licensed for both capacity, users and devices, as well as export controlled functionality like encryption. Let's take a look at the various smart licensing connection options available for collaboration applications. As smart licensing was originally conceived, the expectation is that there is a secure HTTPS connection in an outbound direction from the on-premises application to the internet and the Cisco Smart Software Manager service at software.cisco.com. However, that direct connection, although secure and initiated in an outbound direction, just like any call to a web page from a client inside the organization, was not something that all customers were comfortable with, particularly those with highly secure deployments. So, to address this, Cisco developed a number of alternative ways to enable smart licensing connections that highly secure customers might be more comfortable with. This includes support for HTTP or web proxies on the connection to Cisco Smart Software Manager service. So this is great for customers that use secure proxies for their web and other internet traffic, as they can just point the smart licensing communication through the proxy. Another alternate method for the smart licensing connection is the use of licensing satellite, specifically the Cisco Smart Software Manager satellite, or SSM satellite, which runs on a server inside the organization's internal network. In brief, The SSM satellite provides the Smart Software Manager service locally to the applications that reside in the organization's data center, and in turn, the satellite forwards licensing information externally to the online Smart Software Manager service at software.cisco.com. In this way, the SSM satellite serves as the smart licensing intermediary transit point, which is more secure than having the applications communicate directly or via proxy with the online Smart Software Manager service. But even with those alternate smart licensing connection options, proxy and satellite, some customers still didn't feel smart licensing was secure enough and instead wanted a true air gapped method such that the application servers would never directly or indirectly communicate with the online Smart Software Manager service. For this reason, Cisco added a fourth smart licensing connection method called Specific License Reservation, or SLR. This method was introduced with Collaboration System Release 12.5. Let's have a look at the Specific License Reservation, or SLR process. First, it is a process that requires for each reservation a one-time manual exchange of information between the collaboration application and Cisco Smart Software Manager. I've broken down SLR into 4 steps here. Step 1 involves the administrator enabling a license reservation on the application, for example, Unified Communications Manager or Unity Connection, and then generating a reservation request code. Note this is done via the Application Command Line Interface, or CLI. All SLR or specific license reservation actions are available only on the CLI. That is to say, there are no GUI or web interface actions for options for SLR configuration. Okay, next in step 2, the administrator is going to log into the Cisco Smart Software Manager service at software.cisco.com and is going to enter the reservation request code that we received from the application in step 1. The administrator also selects the license type or types and quantities to be included in the reservation. Next, Cisco SSM service generates a reservation authorization code for the administrator to copy or download. And then finally, in step 4, the administrator returns the collaboration application CLI, or returns to the application CLI and copies or uploads the reservation authorization code received from the Cisco SSM online service in step 3. This will complete the reservation request and license the application. Now that we're clear on smart licensing for collaboration applications and understand the overall specific license reservation process, let's walk through the license reservation process on a live Unified Communications Manager system so that you can see how this is done. The Unified Communications Manager SLR demo is divided into 3 steps. In the first step, we'll confirm the system is in an unlicensed state. Next, in step 2, we'll actually transition the system to a licensed state using SLR. And finally, in step 3, we'll confirm that the system is in a licensed state. As I just mentioned, this SLR demo is divided into 3 steps. And in this first step, we'll confirm the system is in an unlicensed state using both the web or graphical user interface GUI and then the SSH or command line interface CLI of Unified Communications Manager. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at Unified Communications Manager Administrative Web Interface, or GUI. We begin by logging in. Once we've logged in, we can see immediately that our system is not properly licensed. Notice the message at the top of the screen which indicates the system is unregistered and running in evaluation mode. So we need to license the system by registering with Cisco Smart Software Manager service, or in our case, by creating and installing a specific license reservation. Let's take a closer look at the licensing situation on this system. But before we do, notice that the version of Unified Communications Manager running on the system is 12.5.1, and specifically, we mean 12.5.1 SU2. Now, let's navigate to the License Management page by selecting System, Licensing, License Management. Once on the page, you'll notice under the Smart Software Licensing section that the registration status is unregistered and the license authorization status indicates evaluation mode. So the system is definitely out of licensing compliance. Next, notice that the export controlled functionality status is not allowed. We'll discuss this more in a moment, but in brief, without export controlled functionality, encrypted calling is not going to be possible on this system. You'll also notice that under the license requirements by type selection of this page, that the system currently requires 4 Enhanced Plus licenses, as there are 4 users with configured devices on the system. So at a minimum, we need 4 Enhanced Plus user licenses to bring the system into licensing compliance. Finally, before we move to the command line interface on our system, as a reminder, typically we would handle smart licensing via this GUI interface. With regular smart licensing, we would click the register button, and then in the smart software licensing product registration window, we would enter the appropriate registration token. This token would have been created using the Cisco Smart Software Manager online service, which we'll talk about a bit later. Once you entered the registration token and clicked the register button, the system would communicate and register with the Smart Software Manager online service to get required license authorization. In this case, we are doing specific license reservation, so we will not use this regular smart licensing method where we enter a registration token on the system GUI. Instead, we'll use this command line interface. Now that we've checked the system license status via the GUI and have determined that the system is unlicensed and in evaluation mode, let's take a look at the command line interface, or CLI, using SSH. In this case, we'll connect via SSH to the system cucm1.dcloud.cisco.com, and we'll log into the platform using our administrator account. Once logged in, let's check the license status of the system by entering the command show license status. Just as with the GUI, the CLI output indicates that the license registration status is unregistered and the license authorization state is eval mode, or evaluation mode. You'll also again see that the export controlled functionality status is not allowed. Again, this means that we cannot enable call encryption features and functionality on the system. For example, we can't enable SIP OAuth on the system, which enables encrypted calling for Jabber and eventually hardware endpoints using OAuth tokens rather than certificates. Just to prove this, I'll enter the utils SIP OAuth mode enable command. As you can see, enabling the feature fails with a message from the system indicating the system must be registered to a smart account and properly licensed with export controlled functionality allowed. Next, let's try enabling mixed mode on the system, which also enables encrypted calling. I'll enter the command utils ctl set-cluster mixed-mode to move the system to mixed mode, and will confirm by responding yes when prompted. Again, you can see enabling this feature fails because the system is not licensed or registered to a smart account with export controlled functionality allowed. Okay, so now that we've confirmed that our system is not licensed and unable to have encrypted calling features enabled, let's move on to step 2, where we will license the system appropriately. In the second step of the SLR demo, we'll license the Unified Communication Manager using specific license reservation. This will involve starting the reservation on the Unified Communications Manager CLI, completing the reservation at the Online Smart Software Manager service, and then returning to the Unified Communications Manager CLI to install the reservation authorization code. Returning to our Unified Communications Manager CLI interface, in order to create an SLR, the first thing we need to do is enable smart licensing reservations on the system. We can do this by entering the command license smart reservation enable. Once we've done that, we can look at our licensing status again using the show license status command, and notice that the system indicates license reservation is enabled. Next, we will initiate a license reservation by entering the command license smart reservation request. Here you can see that the system has responded with a reservation request code. We will enter this code at the online Cisco Smart Software Manager service. Now let's go to Cisco Smart Software Manager. We'll navigate with our web browser to software.cisco.com, and once logged into our organization's Smart account, we'll click the Smart Software Licensing link. On the subsequent page, click the Inventory menu item. On this page, you'll see the previously created product instance registration tokens. If we were going to do normal smart licensing, we would create a registration token for our system using the New Token button. In the Create Registration Token dialog box, you would enter a description and then click the Create Token button. Notice that there is also an allowed export controlled functionality on the products registered with this token option. For normal smart licensing registration, this option would need to be ticked in order to allow export controlled functionality on the registering system. In the case of specific license reservation, the export controlled functionality is automatically included in the reservation if the smart account and organization are entitled to export controlled functionality. Since we are using the specific license reservation method of licensing, we don't need a registration token, so we'll just cancel this request. To initiate a reservation, we'll want to click the License tab under our account, which will load a list of all the licenses available for our organization. Next, we'll click the License Reservation button. This brings up the Smart License Reservation wizard, where the first thing we need to do is to paste the reservation request code we copied from our Unified Communications Manager System CLI into the reservation request code box. And then we'll click Next. In the next step, we will first tick Reserve a Specific License option to load a list of available licenses. As we noted earlier, our Unified Communications Manager system currently requires 4 Enhanced Plus licenses, so we will enter 4 in the Reserve column for the UC Manager Enhanced Plus license row. And then we'll click Next to continue. In the next step, we review and confirm the licenses we have selected for this reservation. Again, 4 UC Manager Enhanced Plus licenses. And then we will click the Generate Authorization Code button. In the final step of the wizard, we are presented with the reservation authorization code, which we'll need to install on our system to complete the reservation. Note there are 2 options for capturing the reservation authorization code. First, we can download the code as a file by using the Download as File button. We could then install this file via CLI on our system from any standard SFTP server to complete the reservation. The second option is to copy the reservation code to paste at the Unified Communications Manager CLI interface. Here we just click the Copy to Clipboard button, which copies the code so we can paste it at the CLI in the next step. Now that we have the reservation code, before proceeding, we'll close the wizard by clicking the Close button. Now we are going to return to the CLI of our Unified Communications Manager system to install the reservation authorization code. We enter the code using the command license smart reservation install, and then adding the reservation authorization code we copied from the Smart Software Manager online service in double quotes at the end of the command. Assuming everything has been done correctly, we should receive the response, authorization code installed successfully. At this point, we've completed the specific license reservation process. So now we just need to validate the reservation and ensure our system is properly licensed. In this final step of the SLR demo, we'll confirm the Unified Communications Manager system is successfully licensed with SLR. We will start by looking at the active reservation at the online Smart Software Manager service, and then we'll return to the Unified Communications Manager GUI interface and the CLI interface to confirm the system is properly licensed. Okay, let's validate our specific license reservation by first looking at our reservation on the Cisco Smart Software Manager. Here you can see the 4 UC Manager Enhanced Plus licenses we reserved and which are now showing as in use. By clicking the licenses count, I can actually see the product instance that's using these reserved licenses based on the unique device identifier or UDI of our system. In this case, it's the Unified Communication Manager system, which we just licensed with SLR. Now let's return to the GUI web interface of our Unified Communications Manager and log back in. We should notice immediately that, that we are no longer getting the evaluation mode licensing warning message on the main page, which we saw previously when the system was unlicensed. Next, let's return back to the license management page by navigating to System, Licensing, License Management. Once there, note that the system registration status is now registered, specific license reservation, and the license authorization status is now authorized reserved, both of which indicate the system is now properly licensed. You will also see that the 4 Enhanced Plus user licenses are properly applied to our system, indicating we are compliant. Finally, notice that export controlled functionality is now allowed on the system, meaning we can now enable encrypted calling functionality. Finally, let's return to our Unified Communications Manager CLI and have a look at the licensing status there. First, we'll enter the command show license status, and just as with the GUI, I can see that the system registration status is registered, specific license reservation, export controlled functionality is now allowed, and the license authorization status is authorized reserved. All of these indicating the system is properly licensed. Next, let's confirm that encrypted calling can now be enabled on the system by again trying to enable SIP OAuth on the system with the command utils SIP OAuth-mode enable. Notice that this command is now successful with the response SIP OAuth mode enabled, indicating that we can do encrypted calling with SIP OAuth on the system. Likewise, we can try to again move the system to mixed mode with the command utils ctl set-cluster mixed-mode and confirming with yes. Again, the command is successful as evidenced by the message cluster set to mixed mode. Once again, because the system now allows export controlled functionality, we are able to move our Unified Communications Manager cluster to mixed mode, which in turn allows for encrypted calling. Now that we understand specific license reservation and have gone through the actual process of licensing a system with SLR, you should also be aware of some of the caveats or limitations with using SLR so you don't start licensing all of your systems with SLR. First, it's important to understand that given the purpose of SLR is to provide an option for customers that do not want their unified communications manager connecting to the internet to communicate with online smart software manager service, SLR is not supported with any features or functions that require internet connectivity. Specifically, I'm referring to features and functions that rely on voucher generation for cloud onboarding, including Apple or Android push notification service or APNS, or device onboarding with activation codes over Expressway MRA. Next, it's important to be aware that because SLR permanently assigns a set of licenses to a system, these licenses are removed from the organization's smart licensing pool, meaning those licenses are not available for sharing with other systems, which in fact eliminates one of the main benefits of smart licensing. This also means that anytime you want to add or remove licenses from a license reservation, an administrator must again do a manual exchange of information between the system and the Smart Software Manager service to either update the existing reservation or to delete the old one and add a new one. Okay, and finally, let me provide a couple of references for you in case you may want more information on specific license reservation. First, I'd call your attention to the specific license reservation section of the Smart Software Licensing chapter within the System Configuration Guide for Unified Communications Manager, available at the URL shown here. And then, if you want to get some hands-on with smart licensing and specific license reservation, I'd encourage you to try out the specific license reservation scenario in the Troubleshooting Collaboration Security for the Enterprise On-Premises Preferred Architecture dCloud Lab, available at the URL shown here. Okay, that concludes this demo session on specific license reservation, or SLR, for collaboration smart licensing. Thank you for your time and attention.